Welcome back to Greg Hjorth's Greatest Hits. The following game was played during Greg Hjorth's World Tour of 1984 when he was attempting to be a chess professional. This game was played in the British Championship of 1984 against the tournament favourite Tony Miles. Now, Hjorth was doing well just to play Miles in round 4 of this event, but he was considered to be outclassed, and certainly the opening chosen by Hjorth was considered to be near fatal against Miles. What happened was it started as, Hjorth allowed a French, but basically it went back to the Tarrasch defence. If you recall, Greg Hjorth had used this 4 years earlier against Garry Kasparov without success, but he persisted with it. And I don't know if he would have persisted with the line bishop g5 c4 had Miles played it, but Miles played a different system, taking on c5 and then bishop g5. So here d4, bishop takes, knight d5, that's supposed to be better than knight e4, queen d8 and knight d2. And this system had caused Black all sorts of problems back in the 1980s. At the time, the most active player of the Tarrasch defence was another Antipodean, Murray Chandler, who'd turned professional when he was about 15, headed off from New Zealand to England and later became one of England's best players. But he was having real problems with this system. You can try in this position if you want to play bishop h3 with black, just to swap off the knight on d5 after bishop h3, queen d5. It leads to an opposite bishop style position, but one that white gets continuing pressure. So it's very difficult to recommend bishop h3. And black had tried various other moves. Rook e8 is the obvious move. But Hjorth tried a6, which keeps the bishop on that c5, a7 diagonal after rook c1, bishop a7, rook e1. The problem with this position is that it's just very difficult for black to do anything active. White can reposition his knight from d5 to d3 if he needs to. The other knight can come to c4. And it can get quite difficult to develop the bishop on c8. Sometimes there's queen b3. So these positions were considered rather unpleasant for black. Rook e8 is the obvious move, queen b3, and now if you have to play a move like rook b8, it just doesn't feel right. But getting off that diagonal is relatively important. And after knight f4, this position had been seen before. There was a game played by the great Swedish player Ulf Andersson, where he basically just put his queen on d5, kept threatening to get an endgame, remembering of course that the c6 knight is under attack here at the moment. But Hjorth just, didn't play bishop d7 again, queen d5 is annoying. He played rook e5, and now he's willing to allow bishop takes c6, wrecking his pawns, because he believes he can get enough activity after b takes c6. And, certainly Miles trusted him, but perhaps he should take on c6 here, because after knight c4, rook b5, black does seem to be reasonably active. Queen a3 was played. He's looking to dump the queen on d6 again. At some point, if black can get, if white can get queens off the board, it'll probably work out quite well. So Hjorth stopped that with knight b4. All black's pieces look a little bit awkward, but somehow white can't exploit that very well. Knight d3 is logical to get rid of the annoying knight on b4, but after knight takes, queen takes, bishop e6, b3, certainly white is absolutely solid here, but black doesn't have too many problems either. And it's just very difficult for white to ease the pressure, because if white plays e3 or e4, black will take on e3, and the bishop on a7 will come to life. So even though white's pieces look great, it's not clear white can achieve anything. So queen e7 was played, and here Miles begins a manoeuvre that probably doesn't succeed the way he would hope. He played knight d2. It's a reasonable move, but if you leave the knight on c4 and play rook c2, the position's probably about equal. After knight d2, rook e8, there's just lots of little annoying things that black is getting ready to do, probably bishop g4 at some point. So bishop e4 was played, but the bishop isn't stable on that square. After g6, there'll be rook e5 at some point. So rook c2, bishop g4. Here, if you play your bishop back to f3, then just bishop f5 is annoying again, and probably even very, very strong. So the rook moved out of the way, and this stops rook c7, and there's just no clear counterplay here for white. The rooks have no entry squares on the c file. Black is ready to play rook e5, and then the bishop on e4 is going to have to move, and then when the bishop on e4 moves, there will be bishop to f5. So lots of little annoying things here. Miles tried king h1. His idea is he wants to move the f pawn at some point, and he wants the king off the diagonal of the bishop on b6. So rook e5, f3, and instead of moving the bishop, f5. Not a bad idea at all. So if you want to move your bishop to a safe square, well, perhaps you could take on b7 here. It does look dodgy because you are going to lose your... Oh no, then queen takes b7 is good enough, and you can't take on g4. So perhaps bishop c6 is playable here, but again the e2 pawn is going to fall. So queen check and bishop d3 is the obvious way to play, but after bishop h3 there's all sorts of problems for the white king now, and well, Miles's next move overlooks Hjorth's threat, but if you have to do something passive like knight f1, your position is not great at all, and black should be able to build up even more. But knight f1 is probably forced because after b4 rook at e2 is just crushing. Take, and even in an endgame here. So for example, if queen takes queen, we have rook takes queen, and then if you move the knight somewhere, anywhere, we don't have to play d3 straight away. We can go bishop check first, and then d3 is check and wins material. You have to play rook c5, but you're going to be a piece down at once. You're going to have to give up a piece for the d pawn sooner or later. So instead of that, Miles tried rook g1, but that is rather desperate. And after d3, there's all sorts of threats. The rook on g1's under attack. Check, the king's completely safe on h6. Rook c1. Well, there's various winning ideas, but take, queen f2 is simple because of the threat of rook e1 now. And after queen c1, well, I suspect you can win a queen now with bishop g2 check if you want, but this is simpler because that stops all the checks on the diagonal. Queen c7 is a bit desperate, but there's simply nothing to do. Rook e2 is threatened, and that threatens queen takes f4 check, but Hjorth says it with check, bishop check, and here Miles resigned because after rook takes there's rook e1 check. So that was what was remarkable about this game, was partly that Hjorth outplayed Miles positionally, but also he did it from a position where Miles was an absolute master, playing against the isolated pawn, slowly manoeuvring, with black having some weaknesses. And, well, first of all, he didn't attempt to save the pawn on c6 when Miles was threatening it, which was one idea, but he just consistently improved his pieces, and at some point he was able to create some weaknesses around the white king and just exploit it. It was almost like strong player against weak player, but it was Miles that didn't look so strong in this event. In the end, Hjorth didn't finish so strongly in this British Championship, though his performance rating again was up around the 2500 mark. But it was another sign that Hjorth was able to take on world-class players, and in '84, Tony Miles was definitely a world-class player and beat them without fear.